morning.
Hello, hello. How are you, sir?
Look how dapper you are.
Hey. I mean, thank you. I appreciate it. I aim to please you. You're a guest on my podcast, so I got to come the best I can. How are you today?
I'm good, actually. Last week I had some bronchitis. There's nothing like feeling better to make you appreciate life after
Absolutely.
being ill. So
100%.
it's nice to be back. You'll see my trusty assistant, Maria, in the background there occasionally.
That'll work. It's a good thing.
We've got a lot going on, so
okay.
It's nice to get back and get some things done.
For sure, and then feeling
good
better.
To be with you.
Good.
Are you in New Jersey?
I'm actually in Michigan.
Michigan, awesome.
Yes, sir. Yep, I'm in Michigan. Thank you for being here, Patrick. I appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me, for accepting my invite. No,
my pleasure. My pleasure.
You have a birthday coming up on the 20th, right?
I do. I'm a Leo, just by a couple of days. And you?
Okay.
When's your birthday?
Actually, my birthday was last month, but I wanted to wish you a happy birthday in advance, just in case I don't get to speak with you.
Thank you very much. We're launching a Kickstarter campaign.
You're welcome.
Project I'm in mid-production with. Maria, would you send this gentleman the teaser so that he can take a look at that and maybe use it on his podcast if he wants?
Thank you.
We're going to send you a teaser for something. We're in mid-production, and so we're doing a Kickstarter campaign to raise some finishing funds, and it's an action, crazy, colorful, wildly action-oriented thing. Some great people in it. So
that sounds good. This wouldn't happen to be Dying to Live, Dying to Living film.
Yeah.
I actually seen the teaser trailer for that. I'm excited about that. When is that supposed to come out, by chance?
Well, we've got 8 more days to film, and then we'd have post-production.
Sure.
Economically, the way these things work is we get through principal photography, and then we can do a rough cut with a temporary soundtrack, and then that would make us eligible for the minimum guarantee from the distributor. So that part of it can happen fairly quickly, but we had to raise some money to finish that. We've added Chuck Liddell and Cynthia Rothrock and Nina Burke to the cast.
Sure.
So, there's always rewriting going on. And I've got a great team though, so it's coming along.
I'm really glad to hear that. Awesome. Patrick, you look good, man. My first exposure to you was in class of 1999. I mean, you had that villainous charisma, and you were always fit in every film that I've seen you in, and you still look good. You still weight train, and if so, how often do you do it?
I do. We're actually sitting in the middle of my home gym. During COVID, I put a hoist home gym into my living room, essentially.
Sure.
So none of the gyms were open. They are opened back up now, and I go pretty regularly. I also do a lot of swimming, which feels great. Even I have a pool, but it's not heated, and so I go even in the winter when it's cold. And of course, now we're in the midst of this huge renaissance of cold plunging for everybody. You're talking about class of 1999. I wrote a first volume of my memoir, and then I've got a second volume I've been polishing, and Pam Grier plays a part in that, and I met her in class of 1999. And
really?
So we were going through all the photographs of her, and I was like, oh my God, this woman was too good looking.
For sure. Yeah.
In fact, we were going through photographs of all the sort of, even though a lot of times I was hired in films and stuff to assault these women or to hold them hostage or whatever. So, but we were going through pictures of Daphne Zuniga and Angie Everard and Naomi Watts and
Mm-hmm.
Bai Ling, who I've had some encounters with, and
Sure.
for the book. So that was kind of fun.
I'm sure.
Who else? Natasha Cortez, who's a brilliant photographer.
Sure.
Anyway, Pam was, she's such an iconic, pivotal person.
Absolutely.
And it was a great privilege to work with her and spend some time with her.
For sure, I'm sure.
And I hope we're going to be hiring her for I call it an elevated horror film called Flight 22.
Nice.
And it was a screen adaptation assignment, and now it's a producing gig for an film. So
that sounds good. The memoir you spoke of earlier.
That's volume 1.
So when can we expect volume 2?
Well, as soon as I get it into shape. I wrote it prior to COVID, but as a company and an individual, we're really blessed because I started getting some fairly big screenwriting assignments with COVID. Acting kind of shut down for a couple of years, but I put a team together, of which Maria is certainly a pivotal member, and of graphic artists and filmmakers, and we basically do whatever elevates a project: casting, screenwriting, creation of what I call strategic presentation materials, budget, synopsis, graphic presentation. Because most people don't want to read scripts; they want to be captivated by the idea before they read a script, and so that's an important part of what we do. Attachment of lead actors is something we do.
Sure.
So I've been doing all that, but in between, I try to go back to volume 2 of the memoir and polish bits and bobs, and we're assembling photographs to try and get that ready to go out. It's all show business all the time, so I think it'll be of interest to people.
For sure. Definitely looking forward to finishing this current volume 1. I'm looking forward to reading volume 2 as well when it comes out, showing some support for that.
God bless you. I hope you'll find it useful. And
for sure.
We try to speak to writers, directors, actors, producers, and the general literary audience with those books. So, Dying for Living, Wasted Talent in the Valley of Debacle. That's what the volume 2 is called.
Yes, indeed. That's a heck of a title, Patrick. You being a creative, being a writer, being a director, Patrick, when you were a little boy growing up in Virginia and then in Connecticut, did you imagine that you would be where you are now, that you will have achieved what you have thus far in terms of, more or less being an icon? If there were, like I told you on the phone, if there were a Mount Rushmore of villainy in terms of portrayal in film, you would be on that mountain. So recognizable and talented, like I said, charismatic with it. Did you think is that what you always wanted to do when you were a kid, or what put you on that path?
No, you're very kind.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I was early on pretty exuberant kid, and through high school, I was pretty much engrossed by athletics. Which is a form of performance, of course.
Sure.
So I kind of ripped my way through football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, horseback riding, competitive horse jumping, steeplechase, fencing, all kinds of stuff. And my father was a nationally recognized baseball player, and a teacher as well. And so and my mother was a girls' phys ed teacher. So I was pretty engrossed by athletics. And then I also was engrossed by reading. My parents wouldn't let me watch too much TV. I snuck it. And so I saw some pivotal stuff.
Sure.
My thing was I had a TV in my room, but I would turn it on with no sound and let the sound come from downstairs where my parents were listening to shows that I wasn't allowed to watch. But And people don't realize how violent the show Untouchables was in its
Sure.
But all those great shows, Jack Benny and stuff, the genius of those guys. So anyway, I was early on into writing and reading and storytelling when I had a car accident at 17, which kind of ended athletics for about a decade.
Wow.
I turned to writing and to sort of communicate with the world. Writers were already my heroes from the reading I had done.
Okay.
And at the same time, I got into this sort of very balanced healing type of exercise. And that stood me. So by the time I got to acting 10 years later, I had the mind of a writer and the body of an athlete again. And I could put myself back together really quickly after doing my own stunts and fighting and stuff. And so it was really, the car accident was really a blessing.
Okay.
Really put me on the path that helped me out as my life was progressing.
Sure.
It really kind of foundationally formed me because I don't really think of negative events. I think of those things as just God's pivots towards our higher purpose. And even if it appears we're going through a quote unquote negative thing, it's really what we need. I mean, I've spent the last year looking for the extra money for this particular film. Not always the thing that I wanted to do, but I learned so much about the business and expanded my knowledge so much of financing and distribution and all of that. So I'm grateful for everything. This is one thing you learn about as a producer and a director and an actor.
Okay.
The writer, that what looks like a disaster or a debacle is actually exactly what you need in order to make it the finest you can.
Okay.
It's actually been my experience in life.
Okay. For sure.
Did I ever think about acting when I was young? No. If I thought about anything, I thought about becoming a writer.
Okay.
But, you know, I was kind of an exuberant kid and always wanted to learn something new.
Okay.
And that's why acting is really cool, because acting and writing or directing or producing, there's all, okay, I got to learn French for this part. Oh, okay, I got to learn how to box for this one. I got to do some jiu-jitsu for this one. I got to learn about perfume for this one. You know, so life is a learning process.
Okay.
The times that I'm melancholy is when I'm really not learning something new.
Okay. You know what's interesting
about melancholy then?
Sure. What's interesting and it's interesting that you mentioned what you did, because it's levels to things, and to you being who you've been in film, unless you dig deep, you wouldn't know the other things that came with it. Like even touching on your parents, both of your parents were educated and did multiple things. And I wanted to ask you, but I almost feel like I have my answer. Listening to you speak, you almost sound as if you have an aptitude for learning and for education. But initially, before we had this conversation, I wanted to ask you how much of an influence did the fact that your parents were both educators have on you in terms of developing your academic design?
There's no question. I saw with my mother that she was happiest when she was working.
Okay.
That she as a child of the Depression, and most of my parents were, and they came through the cataclysm of World War II. They looked upon education as the pathway to not just the American dream, to the expression of humanity and upward mobility activity. Almost everything that they were doing was education. Okay. And I'm so grateful as I've gotten older that they gave me that foundation.
For sure.
And I'm pleased that I was able to do that for my two sons as well.
For sure.
Now my grandson, to try. I think it's so key. I mean, even an actor, look, some great actors have come out of the street, and that's an education in itself. And everybody's experience is the right one for them at that particular time. But young actors, I say, get a really good liberal arts education as you're going along, because that's going to stand you in stead. And the ability to write. Let's think about launching a career. A lot of times you're in films that the scripts aren't particularly fully realized. So if you can improv stuff that has some vocab in it and some social contemporary nuance to it, then it makes you that much more valuable for a director. If you've read a lot, and experienced life in an educational context, that can be helpful. Now, some people can come out of the greatest prep schools on the planet and universities, and they're not particularly savvy. You got to mix that with real experience of life. So I'm very grateful to my parents. I'm also grateful for the way things turned out for me, because look, we're in the middle of a strike, the actor strike and the writer strike. And yet my work can continue because I've got acting, writing, directing, producing, all this consulting, all these things that I can pull out of my quiver. Now, I have some actor friends, that's all they do. So a time like this is fairly challenging for them. Sure,
of course. When you first started with your acting, you said initially you were looking at more of the writing aspect of it, but did you know early on that at some point you wanted to also direct and produce as well?
Well, the passage of the timeline for me was, I got out of college and university in Richmond, and I went to New York with the idea of being a writer. And so I got jobs at magazines, and either creating advertising for the magazines, or fashion accounts, or all kinds of products, as well as journalism for the magazines themselves. So I was early on dealing with story and things like that. And as a journalist, I would go, and I started playing rugby eventually, and I'd write an article on it or film a segment for a radio show and that kind of thing. And so it was always this combination of writing and performance. And then I took a break from advertising, and to write a novel, but I split a house with an actor who was becoming a big-time Broadway director. And so I watched his process. I wrote a play that got produced in New York. And then I was asked to join theater companies as the guy who would either write plays or select plays. It's called a literary manager. And then I started acting. They needed a guy to do this or do that on stage, and it kind of took off. I was kind of a natural actor. People had been telling me I was an actor for about 10 years, and I'd just go, what are you talking about? I'm a copywriter over at Time Incorporated. But it kind of happened. And so I sort of wrote my way into acting, which has been great for longevity and for economic and psychological sanctuary.
Which do you enjoy more between television, film, and theater, would you say?
Oh, I've enjoyed all of them, frankly.
All of them?
They're all, I think the creative, I was writing about this because I got to do a lot of videos for this Kickstarter campaign. And to try to communicate to people why they should support us in this campaign. And the creative process, whatever it is is about you have a job and you bring to bear whatever vision you can to it and energy and deliver the goods. So it's all really the same thing for me at this juncture.
Okay.
You know, it's always great to get a check.
Yeah.
It's always great to be able to take care of people that you love and your family. And one of the great things I love doing as a producer is to actually hire people and try to take care of them with jobs of meaningful creative work, and which I think of as almost a sacred responsibility, is finding work. Because just like education, work is something that is grounding and central to people's experience of happiness. Did you ever read a book called Passages?
I can't say that I have, but I will now. Tell me about it, please.
Well, it's a book. I'm drawing a blank on the writer, but she was very famous. It may have been Shana Alexander, a great journalist. But they've done studies of what makes people fulfilled and happy as they go along in their life. And there was your relationship to work, your relationship to your loved ones, your spouse and your children and your family, your relationship to the universe, the God, the creator, whatever. And those things are central to having a sense of fulfillment and happiness as you proceed in life. Without all of them, let's see, work, loved ones, spirituality, the universe, and the sense of community with the other, mankind. Those are the four elements that they've isolated as being central to having a fulfilled sense of happiness in life. And I think that's true.
For sure.
So if you just have a relationship with your work, but you don't have a relationship with your loved one and your family, you're not going to be as fulfilled as you might be.
Very true.
If you don't have a relationship with something outside yourself, like God and the universe, you may not be as fulfilled or happy as you might possibly be. And with the rest of mankind on some fundamental level. So I've kind of used that as a pillar of how I've tried to go about things.
Okay. And then in addition to that, I mean, I could see where people that learn from you, you know, you've been exposed to you to pick that up from you. So, I mean, passing it on, no better way to show people how to do it than to do it yourself. So on their behalf, and those that have already told you, thank you. I thank you for that example you've said as well. I mean, because things like that are very important, it's vital, you know.
Well, you bring up teaching. I think in some level, teaching and, as you say, passing things along to a generation behind you is a pretty sacred and pivotal aspect of whatever your endeavor is. I mean, this Thursday, I've got a Western I got hired to do called Black Creek. And I don't need to, but I'm getting together with a young lady who is preparing to work here and go through how I prepare a role, because she's got a strong interest in acting as well. And, so that's a great thing. I was a couple of times I was forced economically because I had to just take care of my family. So to take teaching pretty seriously, and that helps me directing, because it gives you a pathway to try to get a significant performance out of someone who perhaps doesn't have that broad background of work, but you've got to make them have a brilliant performance in a film. And what is really key to all of this, I was thinking about it for these videos, is if you're a director or a teacher or whatever, at least at first get out of the way and let the person express themselves and see whether they're bringing something really key to the table. Don't be the first to try to assert your environment or your interpretation of things onto a series of events.
Mm-hmm.
Be there to maybe help if there's some show them if it's the right thing to do, how you do things, but to allow people to find their way, at least initially, to see what they're bringing to the table.
Sure.
I'm a pretty blessed guy. You know, if I could stay healthy, I'll be just doing really fine.
We take it as we get it, Patrick, one day at a time. And you touched on something earlier in terms of initially how you had that passion for, the exuberance for movement and doing things and athleticism and athletics when you were younger, or in school, I should say. Did that play a major part in terms of you performing your own stunts in film? And then also, I've noticed you've worked with quite a few martial artists as well. Michael Jai White, John Claude Van Damme. You mentioned Cynthia Rothrock and Chuck Liddell. I mean, you've been around martial artists, and you mentioned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. Are you a martial artist, Patrick?
A couple things. One, I call it movie black belt.
Okay. I like it.
If you do a little bit of jiu-jitsu here,
sure.
I did a lot of shooting, rifle, pistol, shotgun, long distance sniping, because I love learning about all of that. I studied with and military. I haven't worked with Michael J. White, except he turned me down for Dying for Living, because we're very good at writing people parts. And, people either take us to heart for that, but I guess Michael wants to be the lead in his projects, and I was offering him the supporting thing, him and his wife. But I hope when Dying for Living comes out, he'll have some regret for not having done it, because we've had to come up with very creative situations. People who joined the cast, and we do that, I think, very, very well. Yeah, all of that athleticism not only allowed me to do my own stunts, and by the way, I love doing first-time things.
Okay.
There were about 15 years where I did all my own fights, and I do all my own fights at Dying for Living, but
nice.
That got a little old after a while. What I really liked was blasting through a window with two guns, exploding glass, or doing car what do you call it, stunt driving, and I had some stuntmen show me how to do 360s and 180s and stuff like that. So I got a chance to do those things and continue to do stuff like that. I don't know why, but it's just an athletic challenge. You can get a much better shot too. If you don't have to cut out for a stuntman, you can get an awful tighter shot. And that's really the whole point, to do what's best for the picture. But you better have your own pads, which I do. A lot of state-of-the-art pads. I get suits customized so that you can put the pads in, they don't show. And then you throw the cards in the air with calculation. It's like a dance move. You learn with a dance move. And there's some astounding stuff. Have you seen The Raid?
Yes. Wow. Yes, I have.
This stuff is just incredible.
It is.
And then, of course, your cinematography can help that, how it's shot.
Sure.
So, movie black belt. Yeah, I remember when I was really young, I hated the concept of dilettantism. Some people really didn't, they were just playing. But I grew up to be just playing in a lot of different realms,
Sure.
So,
it goes
whatever you learn, and I'm grateful for that.
Gratitude is something that you definitely exude, humility and gratitude, and I really enjoy that about you. Those are other things to enjoy about you, in addition to what I was exposed to for the past, what has it been, Patrick? 30 plus years or so that you've been in the business?
Years, yeah.
Congratulations.
1984, really. as a professional. I was
Sure.
probably acting 2 years before that as an amateur.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a lifetime.
Sure. Absolutely. You once said you've been killed, beaten up, jailed, and by nearly every leading man on Earth and in outer space. Who would you say were your top 3 to 5 leading men that you've been blessed to work with?
It's a really, really great question, and I
Thank you.
addressed some of that in the book for sure. There are a lot of them that are completely out of their minds, but I think they're fabulously interesting to observe psychologically and what fame and things does to them. I'd say Tom Cruise and Arnold are probably the most engaging personalities.
Okay.
And Arnold is just an amazingly fun guy to work with.
Okay.
I was prepared for him maybe to be a little arrogant, but he's not at all.
Nice. Okay.
Tom is really so dedicated to the products. And I worked with him up to Minority Report. We were doing our own stunts, but he's taken it to a whole other level. He's so dedicated to a fine product. Those guys are incredible. Chow Yun-fat, the most gracious human being I think I've ever met in my life, hates guns, which is really funny given the killer and Hard Boiled and those films that he came to fame with.
Sure.
Jean-Claude is an interesting guy who has evolved through a crazy life of indulgence and perhaps some vectors into some behaviors that were excessive, but I think he has a good heart.
Sure.
But he has a lot of psychological things going on. There's a group I call the Gang of Six.
Okay.
Which is Gary Busey, Michael Madsen, Tom Sizemore, who's no longer with us, Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Mickey Rourke. All fabulously interesting guys to observe, all with their human failings, like all of our own. So who's the greatest leading man I've ever had? I mean, that I've ever been with? They're all interesting. I honestly, it's all fodder for the memoir and the observation of humankind. Eric Roberts is a tremendous actor, and I've worked with so many times that he always delivers the goods. He uses cue cards, and so but I understand it because he's working so much. He's going from one job to another every single day.
Sure.
For me, I like to learn the lines, and I'm grateful I do it with a fairly. I have what's pretty close to a photographic memory, which I'm really blessed that I have.
For sure. Wow.
I can learn lines fairly readily, but you'll do things with giant cue cards for Eric, and he'll be very, very adept at using those. They'll be all over the house and stuff like that. Like Brando, who used a radio mic, and he wrote cue cards in drawers and everything else where he was going on. Whatever works is okay. Now, I wouldn't like that if it was a symptom of indulgence and lack of discipline. It's not that for Eric. It's almost a symbol of discipline because what has he done? Like 300 films in the last 3 years? I mean, it's crazy. He's gotten, so they go to his house to film because he doesn't have the time to go to the set. That's part of a distribution thing. Let's just get Eric on the marquee doing a part. He does a great job. And at the same time, he's in things like Batman and these big films. He's just a working animal.
For sure.
Very admirable, very different, very unique. So there are a lot of them.
Okay. What would you say have been your I'd say, let's say your top 3 favorite projects, because you've done many, but what would you say your top 3 faves?
It's Kendrick, it's really often asked questions, and the long answer is they're like children. You love each one of them as much as possible, and it would be doing a disservice to think. But it's hard to beat working with Steven Spielberg on Minority Report. But there are these tiny little films I shot in a weekend. You show up, and 5 minutes after you're there, you're using an Irish dialect that you put together really fast. You're doing your own driving, stunt driving. You're shooting your own weapons. You're spouting your own dialogue. And so there's something to be said for that improvisational aspect of filming. The longer films, relative to a television series or those short improvisational films, there's a lot of downtime. So I'm usually taking my film company onto the set with me in the trailer and in between setups doing, you take a film like Minority Report, it's got hundreds and hundreds of components and people. The credits, look at the credits that go at the end. So they go on for days. So you're going to have some downtime, even if you're the lead in a film. So I would write or produce or do stuff like that in the interim.
Okay.
Or play softball or something with the other actors. But
It's moving around. Patrick, tell me about Uncommon Dialogue Films.
Well, again, with the advent of COVID, I was very lucky. It started out, I got an assignment from a lady and director in Texas that had to do with a true event that took place in 1971 in Taiwan. And I said, oh my God, I can do the script and talk about everything between China and Taiwan. So I started getting these authoritative, a lot of it was I would be consulting, like they'd hire me for a consultant to convey what I felt that their project needed in order to get ready to be presented for funding and to be a significant addition to the world of cinema. And they'd be happy with that, so we'd get hired to script it, cast it, attach actors, write the strategic materials. And so I did that all through COVID and continue to do that. And I couldn't do that alone. So my wife is pivotal to that. A writer-director named Raffaello, great graphics guy. He's part of that. Jeff Snyder, another graphics film director who's part of the team. Maria. And we put all of that together. So that's Uncommon Films. Now, when we go into production, like actor shooter, of course, the crew goes up to about 35. And a cinematographer and lighting people, costume, glam team, wardrobe, hair, props, armory, all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
So the payroll goes up for that, but then you're in production.
For sure. Patrick, what is some advice or encouragement that you would share with someone that's experiencing a tough time in life?
Well, advice to anybody is probably individual for whatever that particular situation.
Sure.
Even let's say to an actor who's wanting to launch a career, or writer, director, or something.
Okay.
There's different advices if you're 17 or 14.
True.
Maybe you're 35 or you're 40.
True. Okay.
An overall thing would be, and it's a hard one to impart. Let's take a veteran who's lost 3 limbs and has been burned over 85% of their body. How do you convince them that this is part of their journey that eventually they may be grateful for because it leads them towards their higher purpose. Well, there's examples like guys who've been blown up by IEDs and they became stand-up comedians or inspirational speakers, or they went to work for the Defense Department so that they could be in the fight with their brothers again, which is key to those people. There have been people with amputations who have gone back to combat 6 months after their injury. So it's key to have a mental outlook that I'm not going to allow this to stop me, that I'm actually going through what I'm supposed to be going through. Again, that's a challenge sometimes.
Sure.
But if you don't get that, you may fall into depression and you may fall into stuff that is really not going to lead you to the high ground. One of the ways that we aspire to doing that is to, if like I have a project that we want to use real veterans because their scars are reflective of the reality of the people that were in the movie. So hopefully what could happen then? What could happen is that veteran could then say, if what had happened to me, the IED explosion, had not occurred, then I wouldn't be here doing this great film with Patrick Kilpatrick and his team.
Okay.
So that's a gift that we might be able to give to people like that. The other thing, of course, is there are examples of all the people I described, the guys who went back to combat. You're going to have to, no matter what happens to you, let's say the death of a child, that guy who put together America's Most Wanted, his child was kidnapped and murdered. How do you recover from that? First of all, you may never recover, but you've got to take that energy and turn it into something. And how many criminals has that guy taken off of the street?
True.
Because of his transforming that horrible, appalling event into something that was positive for others.
Sure. Absolutely.
It takes some inner strength to do that and courage to move forward. But what's the alternative? Do we really have a choice other than to shoulder on and to try to turn the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, to borrow a phrase from a low-level writer named Shakespeare, to turn that into something positive. So there you go.
Okay, pretty good. Patrick, what is a word of encouragement that you wish someone had shared with you, or a word of advice that you wish someone had shared with you when you faced a tough time at some particular point in time in your life?
Well, I've had producer buddies that could have saved me a lot of time.
Okay. Sometimes
people have this notion that creativity is finite. And also they may be concerned about the competitive nature, that maybe you're going to somehow take away the pie from them. My feeling is you're not going to do that. There's an infinite amount of giving that you can give. If I was going to give some, and I benefited from this, try to find out where excellence lies. And it's easy to do. Let's suppose, for example, you want to be a politician. And what you do is commune with the masters. Who have been the great politicians? Who can I study that can show me a path to excellence? If it's writers, if you're writing novels, it's Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Flaubert and Moliere and people like that. If it's filmmaking, it's Spielberg, it's Michael Mann, I've drawn a blank, but his name, he did Path to Glory, Stanley Kubrick. Study the masters, study them, focus on how did they do that. I mean, I spent a period of time just mimicking Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Hunter Thompson and Ken Kesey and Thomas Wolfe to try to know how to write. So find the activity that you want to mimic, you want to aspire to, and study how those masters did that. And that doesn't cost you anything. You can go to a library or go on Amazon and get used copies of film. You can go on Netflix and, you study all these films. Study doctors if you want to go to medicine. Study the masters and aspire to that. And you'll find your own voice, which eventually will surface, because it's not about mimicry. It's just developing techniques of how you're doing it. And realize it's a collaborative process. Nobody gets to where they're going without a brain trust of people at Uncommon Dialogue Field. I'm working right now with directors that I'm assigning to particular projects, attaching. Gratefully, they're interested because we've done a lot of great work, but they're honing the script with us, and their collaboration is key. Try to make sure that you're collaborating with thoughtful people who have something really to bring to the table. The hard part is knowing that everybody has something to bring to the table. Like, if I go to an audition, you always want to do auditions, rehearsing in front of live people. You don't do it in front of a mirror, because you'll open your mouth at the audition and it'll come out and it won't be the same way that it did in rehearsal. So do it with live people. And if I go to an audition and I couldn't find somebody wandering the halls or something, or to run the lines with me, there's a guy with a pneumatic drill ripping up the sidewalk. Hey, if I give you $5, will you listen to me run these lines?
Okay. Wow.
And guess what? The guy doesn't know anything about entertainment, but he will say, no, that doesn't really ring true, what you're doing. So here's the other thing. Faith is so important. Have faith that the universe is going to provide the things that you need to do to find your way to it. But if you're looking for an acting school, go find somebody. They can contact me. I'll tell them where they should go. It'll be an A-list way and an economic thing that works in for what they're doing, or Juilliard School of Drama, Yale School of Drama, or wherever you are. If you're in San Francisco, ACT, or if you're a writer, try to go to USC and UCLA and their screenwriting program. Not everybody can go to those places, but find a really great university that's nearby and get into a really good creative writing class. And study those films. How did they do it? How did Spielberg do Saving Private Ryan? That's what you want to do.
Sounds good. Very good. Very good. Well, Mr. Patrick Kilpatrick, I appreciate you again so much for taking the time to have a conversation with me and giving me some education and a small glimpse into the magnificent life that you've led and continue to lead so far. I'm looking forward to seeing the film that drops next year, hopefully, prayerfully, and just everything else that you're working on. You, like I said, when we spoke on the phone, you've been a part of my childhood. So to be able to see what you've done throughout the years and to continue to do things is definitely an inspiration, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you, what you're doing. I just shout out shameless moments and self-promotion. There's a movie coming out called Nessie about the Loch Ness Monster. It's family entertainment, a fun comedy and that I'm leading in, and that's out in the UK and Scotland, and hopefully will be coming to distribution platforms here. So there's that. Look for Black Creek, the Western I'm doing with Cynthia Rothrock and Olivia Cooper, and a bunch of great people, Don the Dragon Wilson. And Dying for Living memoir and Dying for Living film. So
looking forward to every bit of it, kind sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
In the days ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you one more time, please.
I'll talk to you in the days ahead, and send me a link when you are ready to broadcast, and we'll pop it out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, sir. I will definitely be in touch. You keep up the good work. Keep shining. God bless you, and take care.
Thanks, sir. Cheers.
Cheers.